Hey guys, welcome back. Tisha here, back with another reading for The Sound of Gravel. Do me a favor and hit the like button. I'm going to apologize in advance for the way that I sound. My sinuses decided to act up. I knew it was coming. If you watch one of my crime segments the other day, my It's Getting Real, you heard me say that I feel like I'm coming down with something because I have a dry cough, and sure enough, my sinuses decided to act up. But only thing I have is congestion. Thank God. So I got my little station ready with my sanitizer and with my Kleenex and all that other stuff. Hopefully I don't need it, but just in case, I'm warning you, because y'all know I don't edit, that I may have to utilize that item. Anyways, let's get into it. So we are reading from chapter 12. School had been out less than a week when Mom announced that she had found us a home of our own, a rental she would pay for out of her government assistance checks. The old house was on the other side of the railroad tracks from my grandparents' neighborhood, but well within walking distance. That's great. We were ecstatic. We knew what it meant. We were in the magically delicious land of California for good. I think that's what they think. But as some of you all have stated in the most recent reading, a lot of times these women go back and forth until they're done. So how long do we think that they're going to be there, you guys? Put your predictions down below. For me, I give it a year. I give it a year. But y'all tell me what you think. The house had a tan exterior and dark brown trim. In the center of the front yard was a gigantic oak tree, much taller than the house itself, with thick roots that extended across the entire lawn, making it look lumpy and brown. It was more like a tree with a house than a house with a tree. Wow, the tree really took over. The shade of the branches helped cool our kitchen and living room all summer long. The cement porch was the red of the fancy lady's toenails I had seen on the TV in my grandpa's living room. The front door was dark brown with thick, glossy paint that reminded me of chocolate, and it even sounded sticky when we opened it. Inside, we discovered a spacious living room and kitchen surrounded by 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom, but not a stick of furniture. Here's the thing, even though she's giving us the descriptions that she's giving us, it still sounds like such a major upgrade from where they were living before. Like, you actually have walls and a porch and shade, and it's insulated, and you don't have to worry about, certain visitors and all those other things. So far to me, this sounds great. I thought houses came with that sort of thing. No, they don't. What did come with this house was a musty smell of wet wood. Our empty home looked huge, large enough to hold 2 families, at least by LeBaron standards. Mom looked happy with her choice, in part because it gave her a reason to spend each Friday evening of the summer, pen in hand, scanning the local Gazette for garage sales where she might find furniture, electronics, and small appliances for our new house. One of her first bargains was a secondhand TV, which she plopped down on the carpet in the living room against a bare white wall. It was the first time we ever had our own television set. From that day forward, we spent hours and hours in front of it. Mom told us we were only allowed to watch cartoons, but often she'd sit with us in the evenings and we'd all watch family sitcoms together. She'd sit with Mary resting over her shoulder, laughing at Mr. Drummond, Arnold, and Willis on different strokes, and Mrs. Garrett on the facts of life. Oh, I loved the facts of life, y'all. I did. I loved Mrs. Garrett on the facts of life. We could tell that mom loved watching TV almost as much as we did, but she'd get angry whenever we tried to watch something violent or grown up shows she called inappropriate. Not only was life different in Strathmore because of the TV, but in California, we didn't have to go to church anymore. There wasn't a church close by that taught the same things we believed. Mom said she missed going to church, but I didn't. I was having too much fun. So she still left her husband, and yet she still believes in polygamy, which is one of the reasons why a lot of them probably go back, because they still believe in this thing. But what he did to her was so rough to listen to and to read last chapter, that her going back just breaks my heart. Also, and I noticed some of you all said it too, isn't it interesting that Irene never said a thing about the abuse? Like, that was never mentioned. She talked about the violation aspect of things, but she didn't talk about the abuse. Mom didn't have a lot of rules, and the few rules she did have, she didn't always have time and energy to enforce. The house could get loud and chaotic. The days of grinding our own wheat, making bread and cheese, and milking cows seemed far behind us. Mom loved chocolate ice cream with nuts in it as much as we did. So there was always plenty of that in the house, along with all sorts of other junk food she'd buy at the grocery store just down the street. We only occasionally had beans and rice and never had to eat mush for breakfast anymore. On Saturday mornings, we sit in the living room in front of the TV eating bowl after bowl of cereal that Mom bought in large, clear plastic bags. So compelling was the Saturday morning cartoon lineup that none of us even noticed when Mom slipped out to go to her garage sales. I never got to watch the Saturday morning cartoon lineup, because I was at Venice and we weren't allowed to watch TV during the Sabbath. So I missed out, y'all. I don't want to laugh too much because I don't want to cough, but I missed out. I heard it was really good. Mom worried about Mary. She thought she should be crawling or at least rolling over. Mary couldn't even hold her head up. Oh no. Around the time we moved into our new house, Mom's Medicaid application came through. So we spent a lot of that summer taking Mary to the doctors to try to find out what was wrong with her. But it seemed that no one ever had any answers to Mom's questions. One bright Saturday morning in the middle of July, Mom opened the door of my white, bare wall bedroom and startled me. "Do you want to go yard selling with me, Ruthie?" she asked in a whisper. Still half asleep, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to miss watching cartoons. The sky outside my window was still pitch black, and I was warm and comfortable in my very own twin bed. Finally, Audrey and I were sleeping in separate rooms. Wow. And I woke up dry every morning. "I'll give you $1 to spend," Mom said, sensing my hesitation. As I came to, I began to get excited about going shopping all morning long with Mom. She never asked Audrey or the boys to come with her, and she hardly ever gave us our own spending money. I rose quietly and tiptoed out the door, wincing as I passed Audrey's bed and caught a whiff of her urine. Oh, wow. Mom smiled apologetically. Whatever influence she once had on Audrey had been lost, and Mom knew it. I want them to get Audrey some help. Especially now that she has Medicaid, I want her to get her some help, because I can't help but feel bad for Audrey, because Audrey seems to not be able to control when she acts out and things of that nature, and it just breaks my heart. Audrey now refused to use the toilet and wore diapers day and night. Mom drove us to the bigger neighboring towns of Lindsay and Portville, where the streets were wider and the homes larger. Porterville. I wonder if Lane did something to that little girl. Anyways, I just thought about it. The garages were so big it seemed as if we were shopping at huge department stores. The real yard sales have nice stuff, Mom told me as we drove down one quiet tree-lined street. But in some of them, people are just reselling what they bought at other yard sales, trying to get a higher price. Mom prided herself on being able to detect garage sale wheat from chaff, even from a distance. She slowed the car as we approached every sale, but often we would speed away without even stopping. Mom having already seen that it was mostly overpriced junk. That was my signal to put an X through the corresponding ad in the newspaper while she unfolded and refolded an area map and found her way to the next stop. Her mother is very determined to make sure that she gets stuff for this home, hearing that she has like the whole ad and she's crossing out things and things of that nature. Absent the usual distracting noise from the television, enjoying a quiet moment as Mom drove from house to house, I was reminded of the mean girl at my old school who talked about all the retarded people in my family. I started thinking about Audrey and her diapers, the way Luke wouldn't pronounce words the right way, and how Mary still couldn't roll over. I had wanted to ask Mom about the girl on the playground for a long time, but I needed a private moment to do it, and private moments in my family were rare. What does retarded mean? I asked after a deep breath. Mom seemed irritated by the question. She cocked her head back and looked at me with an exaggerated wince. Where do you hear that word? Her nose scrunched up beneath the bridge of her glasses. A girl on the playground in Mexico told me we had lots of retarded people in our family. She said her mom knew you and that you have lots of retarded babies. Who was it? Mom demanded, turning into a new neighborhood as fast as I had to hold on to the door handle. I don't know, she asked me if I was retarded too. What does she look like? Mom was almost yelling now. She pulled over to a curb while I stumbled through a description of the girl. I don't know who that is. Mom realized we were lost and angrily unfolded the map. Did she say who her mom was? No. Mom switched off the van's engine, took a deep breath, and sat back in the seat with her hands folded over her lap, exhaling slowly through her mouth. Ruthie. Your teacher says that you're real smart. She sees lots of kids, so she knows. That little girl was just being mean. If somebody asks you a question like that again, you don't pay any attention to them. You tell them it's none of their business and turn around and walk away. Mom looked at me from the map with red, wet eyes. The anger had been washed away from them, and I felt emboldened. Why is Mary going to so many doctors? Mom tossed the map into the back seat, started the van, and pulled away from the curb before answering. Mary is sick. The doctors think she was born with a birth defect, but they don't know what it's called. It's kind of like what Luke has, and they don't have a name for his either. Mom made a U-turn in the middle of the street while she fished a tissue out of her purse to blow her nose. They have to do lots of more testing on Mary to find out what's wrong and how they can help her. Is she going to be sick for a long time? I really don't know, sis. I hope she's going to be fine. We drove a bit before she said, all families have problems. She stared intently at something just over the horizon. We just have to have faith that everything's going to work out and be okay. She looked at me, shrugged her shoulders, and smiled. Don't you think so, Ruthie? Yeah, I replied, not convinced. The next yard sale was a good one, with many newer items and almost nothing broken or falling apart, although everything cost more than $1, so I kept mine in my pocket. Mom brought an entire box with boys' clothes written on its open flaps. She also lingered for a long time in the book section with her head bent over a box filled with beat-up old volumes going for 5 cents apiece. She gathered up an entire stack of coloring books, stood up, and flipped through each to find the ones with the fewest already colored pages. She settled on a tattered pile of treasures. I'll give you a dime for all of these, she said to the proprietor. They settled on a quarter, and when we were safely out of earshot, Mom confided that she had gotten a good deal. She was even happier about all the little boy pants she found without holes in the knees. These were rare finds, she said, because boys played rough and usually wore out their clothes before they could be sold. Thanks to a string of Saturdays with good sales, Mom had the entire house fully furnished before school started again. Thanks to the welfare and SSI checks from the government, compensation for Audrey and Luke's disabilities, we had a ready supply of food too. And American breakfast soon led to American lunches and dinners. By fall, meals of beans and rice were a thing of the past. Now our favorite foods were macaroni and cheese, peanut butter and jelly, hamburgers, and french fries. I sometimes missed a few things about LeBaron, mainly Brenda and Natalia, but I love strawberry milkshakes and having my own bed. When first grade began again in August, I found myself in an unexpected situation. I was the tallest girl in the class. Sometimes I played with my former classmates at recess or lunch, bragging about the fun I was having in my second year of first grade and making them wish they'd been held back too. Because we were no longer living across the street, my brothers and I began taking the bus to and from school, which I thought was an adventure. I was glad to be back at Strathmore Elementary, and even gladder to be out of the house where Audrey was acting scarier than ever. Now 12, her attacks came more and more frequently. Her patterns shifted constantly, so we could never know when an attack was coming or how to stop it. That has got to be a scary situation. Mom began to suspect that what was troubling Mary was the result of an injury Audrey had caused. That maybe Audrey had picked Mary up and thrown her to the ground when no one was looking. Audrey was more than a decade older than Mary, yet Mom was changing Audrey's adult-sized diapers more often than Mary's. I looked for every reason in the world to avoid the little home Mom had made for us, and when my number one excuse, school, failed me, I took refuge at my grandparents' house. Throughout that fall and winter, I went there every day after school. I was always welcomed by Grandma's homemade cornbread fresh out of the oven. One afternoon in late fall, I stopped by their house on my way home from school, and Grandma was just taking a cake pan of cornbread out of the oven. I sat down with Grandpa at the kitchen table, and Grandma served us both a square piece of white saucers with tall glasses of milk on the side. She had already smeared the honey and butter in the middle of mine, but Grandpa liked his plain. He crumbled his piece up into his glass of milk and started eating it with a teaspoon. Grandma stood at the kitchen sink in her light blue housecoat washing dishes. How come you guys didn't come to visit us when we lived in Mexico? I asked. I love being with my grandparents, and they seemed to love being with us, so I couldn't figure out how come they had never come to visit us when we lived in LeBaron. Did they only love us if we lived in California? Grandma stopped scrubbing the cake pan and glanced over at her shoulder at me as if she wasn't sure how to respond. Grandpa set his spoon onto his saucer. Well, it's kind of a hard place to get to from here, sis, he said with a serious but caring tone. But didn't you guys used to live there too, when my dad was alive? Grandma dried her hands on a yellow hand towel, served herself a piece of cornbread with a sliced raw onion on the side. Ooh. Anybody done that? Mm. Grandma liked raw onions with everything. Oh, well. I like onions, but I don't want them with everything, especially not something sweet. She pulled a chair out from under the table and sat next to Grandpa across from me. Living in Mexico has been hard on your mama, she said with a hint of disappointment. It's hard to make a living for a big family like yours. When we used to visit, your mama already had 3 little kids and was pregnant with you. She lived in a tiny little one-bedroom trailer with no electricity, had nothing to eat but beans out of a big, dusty gunny sack. She never had any money and had to ask for eggs from her sister wives or anything else she needed for that matter. My grandmother had always been open about her disapproval of Mom's way of life, but I had never heard her describe it with such sadness. Ruthie, it broke our hearts to see your mom living like that. When your dad was alive, Grandpa added, all of our daughters lived in Mexico. 3 of them were married to polygamists. Your Aunt Kim almost married one of your uncles who had a bunch of other wives too, but luckily she decided not to. Grandma shook her head and bit into her onion slice. The whole kitchen smelled like sharp, tangy onion and sweet cornbread. Kim was Mom's youngest sister. She left Dad's church when she was only 18. Your mama and her sisters were all living in tiny trailers or, oh, I forgot how to say it, adobe homes, and their husbands were hardly ever home. Your mama was alone most of the time. So young and on her own with all you kids. Grandpa looked down at his glass of cornbread and milk, and the look on his face made it obvious that the memory made him sad. Your dad had too many wives, and he kept marrying more women, even younger than your mama, and she was just a teenager. Grandma shook her head, and a hint of bitterness slipped out of her mouth with her words. We just couldn't believe it. There was no way he could take care of all those wives and all their little kids, and his American wives were collecting welfare in the States. It just wasn't right. When we joined your dad's church, Grandpa added, we had no idea how hard a polygamous life would be. I grew up in the LDS Mormon church, and I always believed in his teachings. When your dad and Irville showed up in Utah, we were living. They asked all the right questions about the church doctrine, and I really believe they were right. And when your dad preached, it felt like anything was possible, like God was speaking right to you. Oh, I never believed any of it, Grandma interrupted. That old Irville, I never liked the crazy look in his eyes. If you ask me, he always has been a big nut. But he knew every scripture in the Bible and the Book of Mormon by heart. Yeah, that's what happens a lot of times. Some of the most evilest people can quote scriptures to you, but they use it for their benefit. I mean, let's be clear. Whether you're a believer or not, people will use the things that you believe against you to have you questioning yourself. So I'm not surprised by this conversation. Uh-oh. I lost my spot right in my mouth. Okay. He was a big talker, and he could argue any point about religion anyone ever asked him. He was like a genius. Grandma sighed as if remembering something sad. And your dad had so many wives and kids competing for his time, but your mom was never the squeaky wheel. She was the easiest baby and the quietest child. She never complained, never asked for anything. Never. Bless her sweet heart. Everyone around her was always asking for stuff within and complaining, but not your mama. She always got lost in the background, and I think sometimes she got overlooked, and somehow, for some reason, she just didn't think she deserved any better than what those worthless old men gave to her, which wasn't much. Oh, come on now. That's Ruthie's daddy you're talking about, Grandpa said, trying to shush Grandma. He always wanted Grandma to be more careful about what she said around my siblings and me, but Grandma was outspoken and opinionated. It was part of what made me interested in what she had to say. Grandma was always talking about how terrible my dad's church was. We all knew she agreed with his teachings. She disagreed with his teachings. Grandma vowed that she never converted to fundamentalist Mormonism. Although once Grandpa became a convert, she had acceded to his demand that Mom and her sisters be raised in the Church of the Firstborn. Well, it's the truth, and you know it is. Grandma looked at me straight in the eyes. We should have never let her marry your dad. She was too young, only 17 years old, but she wanted to marry the prophet, and we had no idea how much suffering and hardship that was going to bring her. We didn't want her to marry Elaine either, but she was dead set on it. All her sisters had left and stayed away from the church. We all tried to talk her out of it. We would have done anything to help her. But after she married Lane, we figured the best thing was to let her get on with her life. So I guess that's why we stopped visiting Ruthie. I appreciate how honest they're being with her. Some people may disagree with it, right? Because I know there's a lot of things that I still haven't told my child in regards to, my past. But I respect the way that they're telling her this, because it's something that she's been, wondering. And after seeing how her mother has been treated by Lane, I think she needs to know that somebody is in their corner. And as a child, if I was living the way that I was living and I saw my grandparents having this great life, I too would wonder what's up with that. So I get her doing this, and I like that they're telling her. Hearing all this, I couldn't help but feel sad. Sure, our lives in LeBaron had been hard. Our house was cold and small, and nothing in it ever worked, but we were living for God's purpose. I didn't like that my grandparents didn't believe what my mom did. What if when they died, they didn't get to go to heaven? I thought about how sad that must make Mom. I didn't think about that aspect of it. And I made a silent promise to try to be better for her. She didn't ask for my dad to be killed, but he had been, and now her family had left the church. I vowed I'd be better about listening to her and doing what she asked, even when that meant cleaning up after and taking care of my siblings, which wasn't fun. Grandma stood up and took the dishes to the sink. Ready to read, Ruthie? Grandpa asked. I love going to Grandma and Grandpa's house after school because in addition to my talk with them, Grandpa would read to me. He and I had just started Joseph and the Coat of Many Colors, a book I had chosen from the Scholastic Book Club because of its shiny purple cover. As Grandpa began reading to me about Joseph's older brother selling him into slavery, the phone rang in the living room. Grandma answered it. Hello? Oh, hi, Kathy. How's it going? Grandma smiled and winked at me from behind her bifocals. Yes, she's sitting right here with Grandpa. You want to talk to her? Grandma didn't hand me the phone. Well, all right, I'll tell her. She hung up. Ruthie girl, your mama wants you to go home now. Mom didn't usually make me go home that early, so I knew something was going on. I got a sick feeling in my stomach, one that stuck with me during the half an hour it took me to walk back to the house. Was Mary okay? I wondered. Oh, Lord. Y'all. Okay. Had Audrey been thrown another tantrum? As I rounded the corner onto our street, I told myself that I was probably just imagining things, that there was nothing to worry about. Then I saw Lane's white truck parked in the driveway. See, this is what I got a problem with, y'all. And understand, I've been through my own things, right? I was verbally abused for a long time. Didn't even realize it was verbal abuse at the time, but I was verbally abused for a long time. It became physical once, and that's all it took for me. And I try to show compassion and feel compassion to those who, stay, because you just never know what people are going through. I just find it hard to understand that this woman was successful in leaving. And I say it again, hear my heart. I'm not trying to shame her. I'm really trying to figure out how she was able to get away and start living this life and be near her parents and have additional help for her kids and have food in their bellies and have them get actual healthy meals other than just beans and rice, and have them getting the help they need in school, to have this man weasel his way back in the picture so quickly. But let's see what happens. Chapter 13. I had to will my body across the porch with its flecks of red paint peeling off the cement. I could hear Scooby-Doo playing on the TV, and sure enough, I found Matt, Luke, and Aaron inside, sprawled out on the living room floor. I walked right past them, deciding to put my school things in my room. The house smelled like Mom's sweet spaghetti sauce and chocolate cake. It couldn't be cake, I thought. Mom never baked unless it was someone's birthday. As I passed Mom's room, I could hear giggling from behind the door. How could she be happy to see the man who had beat her? I felt sick. Ruthie, Mom called out, is that you, sis? I stared at the door. Come in here. Your daddy wants to say hi to you. Y'all, I'm going to try not to be judgmental here. But I'm going to say it. How do you expect her to want to be all chummy with this man who isn't her biological father, who she witnessed have that horrible attack on you? You never addressed it, at least not that she put in the book. You never talked about it. And your first thing when she sees him is come say hi to your daddy. Oh no, Kathy, no. I wanted to run as far and as fast as I could. Instead, slowly and full of dread, I pushed the door open. She was lying on her bed with Lane, the two of them intertwined on top of her wine-colored comforter. Mary was sleeping soundly at the foot of the bed. Mom had her hair curled back and was wearing her mascara and her pearl pink lipstick. She rested her head on Lane's chest, muzzling his blue and gray plaid cowboy shirt, which barely covered his belly. My eyes fixated on his belt, which I had last seen landing on my mom's bare stomach with a skin-splitting smack. Hey, how you doing? Lane asked casually, smiling so wide his crow's feet wrinkled back into the sides of his short, damp hair. It looked as if Mom had just cut his hair and trimmed his sideburns. She and Lane were acting as if nothing were different, as if we had never left LeBaron. Good, I replied vacantly. I'm gonna put my stuff away, Kay? Mom nodded. I couldn't get out of that room quick enough. My confusion and discomfort were even worse at dinner, which Mom treated like a celebration. A fresh chocolate cake with thick, creamy frosting sat on the kitchen counter next to an empty box of Betty Crocker cake mix. Mom mixed a large pitcher of orange Kool-Aid and dramatically placed it on the center of the table. My brothers and I just looked at each other. We were each given large plates of spaghetti with side salads made of bagged iceberg lettuce with shredded carrots and blue cheese dressing. I felt as if Mom had gone crazy. The dressing made the salad smell like mold, and my already queasy stomach was doing backflips. I'm not hungry, I said, Mom. Can I be excused? Lane answered for her. No, you may not. See, this is what I'm talking about, y'all. This is the stuff that I'm talking about. I'm trying not to be judgmental here, but it is hard because what do you mean, no, you cannot? You expect me just to be okay with you just coming back into the picture when the last time that I saw you, you were tearing up my mother? This is trauma. You eat everything on your plate. It is a sin to waste food, Ruthie. I looked over at Mom, who had now finished dishing out everyone's supper. She smiled and she set the remaining spaghetti in the center of the table by the Kool-Aid, then sat right next to Lane at the head of the table. He bowed his head to thank the Lord above for the food, this wonderful, healthy family, and for blessing him with so many wives and children. Amen. I didn't know what to think. I couldn't remember the last time we said grace. We opened our eyes and picked up our forks. Only Audrey didn't participate, bobbing back and forth in her chair and staring at some spot over my shoulder. The Kool-Aid sloshed in our glasses each time her rib cage slammed into the table. Lane stared at the unused fork by her plate as if it were a personal affront. That's how she always is now, Mom said quietly. It was true. By then, it had become a struggle just to get Audrey to drink a glass of water. Mom had been making regular trips to the hospital to get Audrey fed intravenously. Lane told Mom that Audrey was just being stubborn. You stupid idiot. This is not her just being stubborn. Something is wrong. I don't like Lane. And it amazes me that Irene painted him in the picture that she did prior to her finding out what she found out, because I'm believing this version of Lane more than I was what Irene had to say. Irene was in La La Land, and he may have presented himself differently for her, but this stuff right here sounds more believable to me. I'll handle this, he said, and directed Mom to switch places with him. Sit still and eat your spaghetti, Audrey, Lane said to her, as though she were just a typical unruly child who could be coaxed into the right behavior with firm treatment. Audrey stopped rocking for a few seconds, but then resumed banging the table with more force than before. Lane grabbed her arm roughly. Oh, Lord. As though to force her to stay still. Audrey stared down at his hand. She never liked being touched, much less like that. I hope she gets the mess out of him, because he deserves it. And she clenched her teeth, spreading her lips wide open and expelling from her familiar moan. Hey now, you knocked it off, Lane shouted. Everyone went still, the tapping of forks against plates coming to a sudden halt. Then, noticing that everyone at the table was watching him, Lane let Audrey's arm go and switched to a less threatening approach. Take just one bite of your spaghetti, Audrey. You need to eat some of your dinner. He picked up a piece of garlic bread and held it to her lips. Come on, take a bite. It's not going to hurt you. Audrey pursed her lips and her face remained blank. She didn't even look at the bread. Take a bite, Audrey, Lane said louder. He glanced over at Mom. She nodded knowingly. I told you she won't eat anything. I don't know what I'm going to do with her. Mom went back to her salad, took a bite, and shook her head. Next, Lane lifted a fork full of sauce-covered spaghetti to Audrey's mouth. Nothing. I said take a bite, he yelled into her ear. Audrey began to bob forward and backward again. Lane shot up from his chair, positioned himself behind Audrey, and held her motionless by wrapping one arm around her neck and shoulders so he could use the other to shove a fork between her closed lips. What part of this sounds okay to you guys? Take a bite, he screamed again. I couldn't watch, but when I closed my eyes, all I heard was the sound of metal poking against teeth. Then a chair slid back from the table, and I looked up again. I was dumbfounded. Mom was rushing to help Lane, not Audrey. Oh, Jesus. I just feel bad for that child. I feel bad for that child. It's obviously something wrong. She's obviously not doing this on purpose. And y'all are going to hold her down and force feed her and have a fork hitting up against her mouth. And the mom is going to come and help. Kathy, you take the fork and try to feed her, he directed, passing Mom the fork. My brothers and I watched as the two of them tried to force spaghetti down Audrey's throat. Lane grabbed Audrey's hair and pulled it back. She had to squint from the bright light above the table. I don't know what to do, Lane, I heard Mom say. I'm going to try and open her mouth. You feed her. With the violence of a strangler, Lane tried with all his might to pry Audrey's jaws apart, his big fingers obscuring her face as the muscles in his own tightened. He wrenched my sister from side to side with so much force, I thought he'd pull off her head. Audrey won't ever open her mouth, I said to myself. For a few more seconds, Mom moved the fork away and Lane let Audrey go. Her skin looked flushed and she had droplets of blood on her lower lip where the fork had punctured it, and we're going to act like this is okay. After a moment of silence, Lane attacked Audrey with a suddenness that took everyone by surprise, Audrey included. He pulled her head back and shoved the fork in front of her eyes. Take a bite or I'm gonna smack you with this, he yelled. You hear me? You're not leaving this table until you take a bite. Audrey recoiled and her mouth came open. Lane stabbed the fork between her lips. Her teeth clamped closed on the metal. She let out a painful moan, and then, at once without chewing, she swallowed the spaghetti. Mom pulled the fork out, and after that, Audrey's face returned to its customary blank stare. I looked at Matt and searched for some assurance that what we witnessed was okay because maybe Audrey couldn't remember. He nodded and lowered his head to his plate. Now that's a good girl, Lane said, his voice slightly shaky. He glared at me and said, finish your salad. It's day 1 of him being back in their lives, and he's already abusing these people. And Kathy's okay with it. Dang, girl. Normally, it takes a little bit more time, but he's doing it right away. So he doesn't even feel like anything that he did was wrong, obviously. I looked at my plate, then quickly shoveled the whole mass of moldy tasting lettuce down my throat, washing it down with the sticky, sweet Kool-Aid. Lane stayed with us for 3 days. The morning before he left, he said that he needed to see me in the backyard. I hesitated, but decided I better do as I was told, making my way through the kitchen with my head down as he followed behind me. I opened the back door, took one step down, and sat hunched on the top step with my arms folded over my knees. The sun burned through the fog, casting an eerie light on the brittle leaves of the lemon, orange, and avocado trees. Lane walked past me, then returned and sat beside me on the step. He began by resting his arm on top of my shoulder, but I must have flinched because he quickly took it away. Listen, your mom and I have been talking, he said in a soft, wannabe fatherly voice. We think it's best for you to start coming home right after school and helping your mom with Mary while your mom takes care of Audrey. So he's been here for 3 days and everything's changed. After this man beat you. Y'all, I was trying not to judge her, but I'm feeling myself judge her. I'm sorry. Forgive me later. My heart sank. My chin collapsed into my hands. My grandpa is reading me a story after school, I said, attempting to mimic Lane's gentle tone, in the hopes that he might reconsider. Can I wait until he finishes it? He chuckled and patted my back, a gesture that made my skin crawl. The forced smile slipped from my face, although he was still intact. Your mom needs help. Audrey's a handful, and we don't exactly know what's going on with Mary either. Your grandpa can finish the book another time. I remembered my vow to be better to my mom. Maybe I should start coming home after school and help out. Mom always seemed overwhelmed and exhausted, so once again, the kids can't be kids. This is just another example of that. Her face was perpetually pale, her eyes red, her voice raspy from lack of sleep. But the other part of me refused to obey Lane. He was not my father. He slipped in and out of our lives without warning, bringing disruption and terror with him every time. I looked at him with contempt. The next thing I knew, he put his arm around my shoulder, pulled me toward him, and tried to shake the expression from my face. "What's the matter? Come on now, your mom needs you." I nodded, which prompted him to pull me closer and kiss me on the cheek. I wiped my face with my sleeve, my brows twisted into a scowl. Lane got up and left me there, chuckling as he walked back into the house. The next afternoon, I rode the bus home from school with my brothers instead of going to my grandparents'. Lane had already left by then, off to haul a load of railroad tires to Oklahoma. The phone was ringing when I walked in the house, and I continued walking while Mom answered and explained to Grandpa that I would be coming straight home from now on. Mom then told Grandpa about some of Audrey's and Mary's latest episodes. The conversation continued for a few minutes, and as I disappeared in my room, I found myself perplexed by what Mom hadn't mentioned: Lane's visit. Of that, of the disturbing scene at dinner, of his arrival or departure, Mom said nothing. And that is how I'm going to end this. I'm going to have to put up another warning on this because that scene with Audrey was too much. It was way too much. I appreciate Ruth and her openness and her transparency and her letting us see the crap that was going on in her house. I feel like it's such a disservice to these kids. Do what you want to the parent. I don't agree with doing it to the parent either. But I'd like to think that had something like that been done to my child, that I would have to exit. But you all let me know what you think of this chapter down below. Happy Monday. Until next time.